Hey there folks, here I am again with a totally on impulse video. I was not planning on making this even 15 minutes ago. I just knew this video had to be done. I don't know how long this thing's gonna be, but I suggest approaching this with a podcast mindset. I might be going for a little while. I don't think it's gonna be as long as those premeditated, that might be the wrong word for it, premeditated podcasts I've done before on movies and characters and stuff like that, which can go like 2 hours. This one I'm gonna aim for 30 minutes. I'll do my best. I don't know how this is gonna go. Today I'm just gonna say it right now. I rewatched Donnie Darko after not having watched it for a very long time, and I've got a lot to say about it. So being someone who's discussed movies and being someone who has studied philosophy, majored in philosophy, I tied so many things together. But before I hop into that, let me start out with a little bit of a prelude, if you will. So firstly, I wanted to go over my experience with the movie. I'll be glancing at my screen a lot. I quickly just chicken scratch some notes that I wanted to talk about, some points, so that's what I'll be hopping to. No particular order, I just wanted to rattle off my thoughts here, because it's such an interesting film. But anyways, I'm going to start with my experience with the movie Donnie Darko. I watched this, I think, just on a whim in middle school. And I think it might have been a pre-recorded TV version, which may or may not have been a little bit censored. I think that is possible. I mean, there's not a whole lot of foul language or suggestive themes in this movie. It's not very heavy on that. I mean, they are in there, but it's not one of the defining characteristics of this movie. I mean, that's something we could talk about, too, because it's so multifaceted and nuanced. There's so many little things you could discuss. But anyways, I saw the movie in middle school once. That's the only time I ever saw it, though. And all I can remember from that experience is, aside from some fleeting glimpses of scenes, I don't remember why I liked it then. All I remember is that I liked it, but I couldn't for the life of me tell you why. I watched it all those years ago, before high school, enjoyed it for some reason, and I don't know why. Something stuck with me. And even though it took me well over a decade to watch it again, there was always that little bug in my brain going, you gotta rewatch Donnie Darko, you gotta check it out, you'll learn more, you gotta watch it again, reevaluate it. Because over the course of time, I forgot why I wanted to rewatch it. I just knew it was there, but it's just never been assessed to after all these years. It's just been on the bucket list, kind of dropped off. So why am I talking about it now? Again, since I've seen that movie the first time, went through high school, which was a gas of a time, I'll tell you, and I got to college, and then I started studying philosophy. And why am I mentioning this now? This is what allows me to have the whole new outlook on this film today, because I major in philosophy. I, in fact, earned a frickin' plaque, which I have in front of me, for excellence in philosophy. It's kind of my whole life. So I specifically studied, to lay down a few terms here, the German pessimists and nihilists, Eastern philosophy, so that's including the Buddhists and the Hindus, a little bit of Greek and Chinese in there as well, but primarily the Germans and Eastern philosophers. So that's really my sandbox, if you will. So that's what informed a great deal of my creative work, as we've also discussed on this channel in other videos, and also how I evaluate other stories that I watch or see or hear about. So it's really created this foundation for the frame of mind that I've been operating with going forward since I adopted that major in college. And for context, for people who don't know, I'm 4 years graduated. I'm out of there pretty much, but it's still so deep set in my mind at this point. So that being said, since then, as other folks might know, I started a writing group where I live, where I met some of my best friends ever, and we've had some really great discussions. We were chatting online today, just talking about different movies and stuff like that, which was a lot of fun. And I think it was me who brought up Donnie Darko. I think someone brought up Jake Gyllenhaal, and like, oh yeah, he was in Donnie Darko. I was meaning to rewatch that lately. And that was actually true. I was rewatching it or attempting to, and then I stopped at some point for some reason. I think it may or may not have been something to do with the fact that I just lost my job for faults that were not my own, but we've discussed that, so I won't beat a dead horse. But yeah, I kind of just dropped it again. I failed to rewatch it. But again, I was talking to my writing group about it, and there were varied opinions. They were mixed. People were saying, I don't know really how I felt about that movie. And there was someone else who said it was, as the kids say these days, the GOAT, the greatest movie of all time, which is a pretty big thing to say about a movie or anything, really. That's a huge honor in the modern day. So I just put my foot down and like, you know what, guys? I'm going to rewatch the movie, and I'm going to see what I think about it now. So, and I held that promise. Hours later, I took in my laundry, ate a meal, made some hot dogs in my crazy little hot dog machine, which is so cool. But anyways, I watched Donnie Darko all the way through. And another thing I should mention, since I moved into my apartment, I've never really laser focused on watching movies. I love movies, sure, but if I ever throw on a movie, it's usually just to be in the background while I'm doing something else. I've got my knickknacks, my projects, stuff like that. It's background noise while I'm doing other things. If I'm throwing on a movie, it's something I've already seen, so I don't really have to focus on it, right? But by this point in time, it's, again, been over a decade since I've last seen Donnie Darko, so I'm like, oh, if I'm going to rewatch this, I want to be fully invested. So I flicked on the movie, and I did have a few little things to do as I was watching it, but I wrapped those up. And usually when I'm watching a movie and I have nothing to do, I just kind of nap, my mind wanders, whatever. But this movie had my full, undivided attention all the way through. This movie is an outlier in my living alone experience. This one caught me. And I finished the movie, and it is, I don't know if I could call it top 10 movies, but it's up there. I really loved whatever the hell it was trying to do, is the best way to put it, vaguely. It is bizarre, abstract, and strange, but without being conceited or pandering. There's an earnestness to it. Like, if this movie, this concept, were in the hands of a different director, apologies ahead of time, I don't remember the names of the crew or the characters after this. Again, I'm fresh out of the theater, basically. But if a different director or creator were handling this idea, they'd fail miserably. It had to be done in such a particular way in order for it to work. This is one of those movies that screams, I don't have a genre, I don't belong in a family of storytelling. This is just one isolated vision that you can't really put anywhere. It's got some horror thriller aspects to it, it's got some teen drama, it's also an 80s throwback, but it was made in the 90s, so there's some really interesting nostalgia looped into there. There's even time travel. It's a wild concoction that I'm still trying to figure out, and that's why I wanted to do this podcast now, because my ideas are so fresh and raw. And as I was watching this movie, I'm like, oh, after this I really want to see other people's interpretations, what are their thoughts and stuff like that. But then I pulled the reins back, and I'm like, you know what, before I do that, I want to assert what are my thoughts right now, before they're overhauled by potentially better theories or better understandings of this movie. So that's why I'm doing this now, to give you my raw thoughts before I go out into the world and try learning everything I can about Donnie Darko. So that's why we're here. Before I continue, I haven't really laid down anything about the plot, so I will say, spoilers for everything. If you're watching this, I mean, odds are you've seen this movie already. I mean, this movie released, in the early 2000s, late 90s, I don't know for sure, but this one's had its heyday already, and it was a cult classic then, it's a cult classic now. Not a whole lot of people even know what the hell this is, even a member of my writing group, so, spoilers for those of you who don't know it. If you don't, and you somehow found your way to this video, please watch it. It's on Netflix right now, it's so accessible, and just watch it once. Give it a try. Have an open mind. It is so strange, but so worth your time. So give it a shot, and then come back here. Or watch other reviews, whatever you want. But by all means, just see this movie at the very least. So, that being said, let's first discuss the plot of this movie before I actually discuss all the themes I was trying my best to extract from it, or at least how I understood it, because again, it's such an abstract piece. So basically, this story revolves around this guy called Donnie Darko, which is a really bizarre name, but I think intentionally so. We could talk about that later. This is Jake Gyllenhaal's character. And the movie pretty much opens with a disembodied voice in his head telling him that he had just shy of a month before the world ended, which is a lot. Like, part of me is like, it's 28 days before he dies. But no, the voice says in the film, before the world ends. That's not what happens, but it's such a heavy thing. And after we hear that statement, then Donnie just goes through life. He lives in this suburban neighborhood in a county called Middlesex. I wonder if this is in Middlesex, Massachusetts, because that's where I grew up. But there might be other Middlesexes all over the eastern border. I really don't know. But yeah, a suburban, pretty well-off looking neighborhood. He goes to a boarding school. Actually, midway through the movie, it took me a while to pick up on it. I think it was specifically a religious school. I don't think they asserted that bluntly at any point, but it's something you kind of pick up on as you're watching, and you start tying some themes together. You understand that there are certain things that they don't teach, and that's what gives you the understanding of this might be a school that is more faith-driven. But you don't necessarily specify a religion either, so I found that really interesting. Then you see him just going to the bus stop. He has, like, buddies. I mean, they're not really close. They're kind of just egging each other on and bullying each other a little bit. Like, they're hardly pals at all. You also see his family. They're strained and not super close, and they're real foul-mouthed, but in a bizarre way, you get the sense that that's kind of the way that they connect. It's kind of just their language, which is really weird. And then you also have Gretchen, who's this new girl in town. No one knows about her. Everyone thinks she's really cute. And then she goes steady with Donnie for a while, and then we start to learn more about her, and she unpacks her life. And she is also this can of worms, who we'll talk about later, of course. But anyways, all that's to say, this is just the guy going through life. We get into his thoughts. And sometimes he just tells us his thoughts through what he's saying directly to the other characters in this crazy, crazy story. But all of this mundaneness is interrupted by these themes that we'll tackle as we go of destiny, fate, death, existence, and a bunch of other things that I've got here that we will talk about in small bursts as we go. I'm going to do my best to stay organized, but I make no promises. But ultimately, this movie ends where that 28 days runs out, and throughout this whole movie, you're wondering, what would this look like when the world ends, when Donnie ends? What is that going to be? And it's Halloween night, and you have Donnie, his pals, and Gretchen. They're all kind of going into the cellar door, and a concept I actually don't understand. I'm still trying to figure out what that means. I know the English teacher mentioned something about it, but I'm still trying to tie this all together. But after they bop around in that cellar for a little while and pop out, they're assaulted by two bullies from the school. The buddies run away, and then Gretchen's like on the ground trying to catch her breath because she was choked, and Donnie was at knife point. And then a car rolls. Everything that can happen happens at this moment. A car rolls in, runs over Gretchen, who dies. Then Donnie goes after Gretchen to see if she's okay. Out from the car pops out Frank the rabbit, who was in a rabbit costume. I should have mentioned that before. And then Donnie pulls out a gun, which I didn't even know he had. Shoots him in the eye. It's the next morning. He's driving around with Gretchen's body. Goes up on a mountain. Somehow, I don't know, travels through time or alters the course of history, I don't know, but manipulates events in some way, so the turbine of that plane falls into his room. A month ago, when this movie started, I should have mentioned that, this movie began with the freaking plane turbine falling into his room, but he missed it. But this time he manipulated events a month later, so a month ago, it instead killed him. And as a result of that, Nothing that happened in this movie mattered at all. Nothing happened canonically. Which is weird. And in any other story, you could write this off easily as that classic cop-out of, it's all a dream, everything you saw, it doesn't matter. And that's an easy way to kill a great story. But in this case, it works, because it keeps with the themes that it's rolling out, which I will go into shortly. But again, we're just focusing on the plot right now. Anything else I got here? Again, I really just rattle these off. But yeah, tying into the ending again, the reason why Donnie was so obsessed with time travel is because she had an actual name, but his nickname for her was Grandma Death. But she was just this other, almost like this, I likened her to like a Boo Radley character, just like this boogeyman, boogie woman character, who everyone in the town knows, but everyone stays away from. But it's also like a rite of passage to just lock eyes with this crazy shifty lady, just on a dare. But he becomes so enthralled with this woman because she wrote this book about traveling through time, altering history. And towards the end of the film, it turns out he wrote a letter for Grandma Death, and that was one of the things. She just kept opening her mailbox, wanting to see if anyone would ever write to her. Even if she just looked in it 5 seconds ago, literally, she has to keep opening it to see if anything's there. At first you think she's senile, but by the end of the movie you're like, maybe she's waiting for something. Maybe that's why she's such a recluse, because she's so certain something is going to show up in that box. And something did show up in that box. And it was Donnie's letter of him saying, I think you're right about everything, but I'm also hoping you're not. That time travel's possible, that we can alter our history. And the question that we're left with at the end of this movie, like we know that Donnie wants to alter destiny, he wants to alter fate, whichever word you choose. I feel like both mean the same thing, but they also don't. We could talk about that later too. But the real question here is, like, he can do it, and he did do it by the end of this film. He did alter history. He snuffed out that month that we just saw for us, we assume, the betterment of the world, his world, and for the people in his world. But was he right? That's the question here. You don't have to like Donnie Darko. You can despise him. He's not a good human being per se. He could be well-intentioned at times, but he could also be kind of a jerk. He could be a loudmouth. He could be brash. You can absolutely not be a fan of Donnie himself as a human being. But at the end of the day, do you agree? Not even agree, but do you believe there's credibility in what he did in allowing that turbine to hit him so he could lie comfortably in his bed 30 days ago, and allow himself to just die blissfully and just let it happen? So that's the plot. And it's hard to explain the plot of this movie because it ends, there's end credits, the movie ends, the 2 hours runs out, and you continue with your life. But there's so many questions that need to be answered, and that's why I had to do this damn video. So anyways, I need to get my water here. Give me a second here. Again, I'm not sure how long I'm going to be going. It's also past midnight, but again, we've crossed that bridge already. It doesn't matter. But yeah, so I wanted to talk about the characters first. That's the first theme that I wanted to talk about. So one of the themes I noticed about this movie is all the different characters that we get. We have his family, so we have his 2 parents and his 2 sisters. We have Gretchen thrown in there. We have all the different students. We have the 2 bullies and his 2 buddies. We have that, I forget her, I'm blanking on her name for some reason, but we have that one Asian girl who we don't really learn a lot about, but we learn that she had a schoolgirl crush on Donnie eventually, at least towards the latter half of the movie. You also had the teachers. You got the English teacher, Drew Barrymore, who actually executively produced this movie, which I thought was really cool. Then you had I don't know if he was a science teacher necessarily or what, but he wasn't allowed to talk about everything that he understood or believed in because of this school. Again, that leads into my theory that this is a religious school. You have that bad shit wacko health teacher, gym teacher. I don't know what she was, but she was that woman with that board that had, there are two emotions. There's love and there's fear. Which do you fall in? And that's got its own category on this list, don't you worry. But there's so many different characters. I haven't even mentioned all of them. Oh, and Patrick Swayze as well. He's the last one I really wanted to mention. There's a lot of characters. This movie is stuffed with them. So as I was watching this movie, part of me was thinking one of this movie's biggest weaknesses is that we don't have a lot of moments where we just sit with these characters and really get to know them. We get baseline character traits, so they're not quite one-dimensional, although they're like right on the fence there. If you push them over, they'd just be a flat, boring, one-dimensional character. But they get just enough screen time and moments and dialogue where you understand who they are, what it is they want out of life, what their fears are, what they're trying to avoid, and what they want to do. So for me, I thought that was a weakness of this movie. I thought we're not having enough time with Gretchen. I want to know more about Gretchen. I want to learn more about Donnie's relationship with his mother. The first conversation they have together in private, Donnie pretty much cusses her out, and you're like, "Jeez, that's brutal." And she's just trying to check up on you. What the hell's going on? But towards the end of the movie, they have this tender moment where Donnie's like, "What's it like to have a weirdo as a son?" And she says, "It's wonderful." So you see this beginning and end of this arc that they experience, but you don't really see the middle of that story as much. And that can be said about every character in this story. You see their beginning and you see their end, but you don't really see what the middle points were between the cover and back of their individual stories. But as I got to the end of the movie, I started to realize this is kind of purposeful. And I mean, one of this movie's biggest parts of iconography is the use of a cover of Mad World, where we see where Donnie goes back in time and undoes his month and dies from the turbine crash. And you see all the characters just lying in bed that evening before they learn Donnie is dead. And you see how they're all just existing in lieu of his presence. Gretchen's just napping. You see, I think I caught the English teacher sleeping with the science teacher, and I even know there were a couple, unless I saw that wrong. It was dark, I couldn't tell. And Frank the Rabbit, who's got his own category, don't you worry, we'll talk about him. And then Patrick Swayze's character, after we learned what we learned about him, I won't go into detail there, he is obviously distressed, and we know why by this point in the movie. Everyone's kind of just on their own path. And it's almost this way of saying that, yeah, we were focused so much on Donnie, and we weren't focused on these other characters as much. We were focused on them equally, but as a result of that was its own weakness, sparingly so, because they were all given the same amount of little attention. But by the end of this movie, we understand all of them are going through these trials, are going through these questions and struggles, and none of them are at peace. So, even though all these characters are so apart from each other, Donnie is the thing that makes them connected, even if they're not directly aware of that, which is one of the most interesting themes that I did want to tackle, like, subliminally as we go down this list here. So that was really intriguing to me. So, yeah, that was the characters. And then, I skipped over a point, so again, I'm hopping around a little bit. There are two core themes, which I might mention in breaths as I go through these other ideas I want to talk about. There's two words in the philosophy sphere that I did want to briefly go over for those of you who aren't familiar, but that's what informs my understanding of this movie. So the first one is existentialism, which is a pretty universally known one, I like to imagine. I might just have rose-tinted glasses because I studied philosophy, but existentialism is effectively the school of thought, which asks questions as to why do we exist, do we have meaning, is there a purpose to our lives. Those are the kind of questions I derived from the school of thought. And then here comes the second concept, which I would argue is an answer to the school of existentialism. Existentialism has the questions, and then this other word I'm going to bring up is one type of answer. and this is nihilism. This is one of the things that I've studied very specifically in college. Nihilism is a school of thought which, I don't know where it began, but it was very much highlighted by the Germans, of course pre-Nazis and all of that, way before they messed everything up and made everybody look bad. But this was primarily helmed by Arthur Schopenhauer, Friedrich Nietzsche, Hermann Hesse. Nietzsche was my guy in college. He was the guy I studied the most. But effectively, nihilism is the idea that, again, if existentialism is asking, like, do we mean anything? Do we have purpose? Do we actually affect the world? Nihilism's answer, in a breath, is no. We're not important. We don't mean anything. There is no actual meaning outside of this world that impacts us. There is no external force which dictates where we're going. It's a very depressing and chaotic view of the world. But that's not, I argue personally, as someone who I guess you could argue is continuing that nihilistic canon, I argue that nihilism isn't the end of the story. We don't just give up there. We find, in lieu of meaning, we create meaning. And we build things, find people, tell stories that we think are meaningful, even if cosmically they are insignificant. If they're meaningful within this small sphere that we call ourselves, then that's meaning enough. But that's just my answer to nihilism. That's what philosophy is. It's just a conversation going down the line. And nihilism is one of the other big ideas that is prevalent throughout this entire movie. So anyways, I got those two things out of the way, existentialism and nihilism. I just had to mention those before I go any further. So that takes us into other themes, and here's a big one. Religion. I know this is an uncomfortable one, but as I explain this, as a person who studies philosophy, whenever I talk about religion, it's never to say, hey, this religion's great, or this one isn't good, or anything like that. That's not what philosophy is about. Philosophy is about taking a back seat from all religions and perspectives and operating behind the scenes. Like a great and good professor I had began every course with using these two words I'll never forget: informed empathy. As we study all these different perspectives, it's not because we're meant to agree with them, but we're at the least meant to understand why these perspectives are adopted by these other cultures, by these other groups, people, whoever, etc., etc. So that translates into what I'm talking about here. If I'm talking about a specific religion, which I don't think I am, or will, it's not to knock down that faith. That's not the point. Or religion as a whole. That's not my purpose here. Again, I'm just speaking to what I think the movie is trying to explain here. So one theme that we see throughout this movie is Donnie is constantly working against the grain of this town, of this county, Middlesex. He's working against his superiors, he's working against his parents, authority figures, adults. He's very anti-establishment. It's obvious that he doesn't fit in. He has really big and grand ideas that do not fit into the preordained mold that everyone else fits into. He's absolutely a black sheep. And that's kind of why, I mentioned that Donnie Darko is such an intended name. It's supposed to sound outright ridiculous. Like, even Gretchen says, like, what are you, some sort of superhero or something? Or something like that. Yeah, it's supposed to be ridiculous and wacky. Donnie Darko sticks out like a sore thumb in this place. He's supposed to not belong, and he knows that. And to an extent, I think his peers do too. I mean, maybe some are oblivious, but for the most part, anyone who knows Donnie knows there's something up about him that's out of place, out of touch. And another thing that Donnie does, again, building off of him going against authority, is he actively demystifies these ideas that they are pushing. I mean, like, the first obvious, most blunt one is when that gym teacher, as they describe her as, is talking about this spectrum of emotion. Well, not spectrum. I mean, that's per Donnie's point. She says all human action is dictated by two core emotions, being love and fear. And she hands out all these fictional, rhetorical situations that a kid could be going through to each student. And she's like, everyone read this card of a student who's going through a situation. Like, one of these situations could be, oh, a student chooses to cheat on a test because they know they're ill-equipped. And then you go to the board and you decide whether this fits into the category of love or fear. And at least for myself as a viewer, I'm like, well, this is just freaking bizarre. I mean, to isolate things in such bucketed categories, let alone just two. So, and this, again, this was before I picked up on the possibility that, oh, this might be a religious school. But then Donnie goes up to the board, and he lashes out, and he says, this is totally wrong. This is outright bullshit. You're neglecting a whole spectrum, a plethora of emotions that makes life beautiful. Life isn't segregated distinctly into a positive or negative category. That's not how it works. They intertwine and they affect each other. And that's what makes life good, or at the least worth studying. And of course, the teacher has none of that. And then going back to him demystifying these ideas and these characters, Patrick Swayze's character, he had a distinct name which was repeated a lot throughout the movie, but he was like this, I'm still not totally sure what he is, but he was like doing these PSA videotapes that the characters were forced to, the students were forced to watch in their classes. I will use the word forced, that's what it was. And again, this is before I picked up on themes of religion, but they were so odd to me, where these videos open, really cheesy, sparkly 80s promos and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, they're going to talk about, eating disorders, don't smoke, I don't know, something like that. But instead it was on the baseline of avoid fear. Fear is bad for you. And what? It's such an odd elementary thing for a school to be teaching to their students. And then you get Patrick Swayze's character, who is the helm of this movement, if you'd call it that, some sort of agenda. And he gets an audience. He's in the auditorium of the school, and he's promoting his dogma, or whatever you want to call it. And then Donnie goes up to the podium, and he's like, hey, how much do they pay you to come here? And he totally destroys this man. It just says he's illegitimate, he's a fraud, or something weird about him. And he goes out and, with the help of Frank's involvement, we'll talk about Frank later again, Frank the Rabbit, this is YouTube, so I know we can't talk about certain things here, but Patrick Swayze's character was up to no good. I'll leave it to that in the background. I think you can assume enough from that. Well, you've seen the movie by now, so you know. But yeah, then he gets exposed and he gets sent away and probably goes to jail, whatever. We don't get a full conclusion on that before the month ends, but he's out of the picture because of what Donnie did. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about, rounding out the religious theme. Again, no religion in particular, but this society here almost has this religion-like hold on what people are allowed to believe, on what they're allowed to experience. Like I mentioned, the science teacher, this is one of the few people that Donnie actually liked talking to. He went out of his way to talk to this teacher about time travel, altering fate, and things of that nature. And I think he also mentioned a preordained destiny brought on by God. I think that was one of the only times that God was straight up mentioned in this movie. And at that point, that's where the scientist said, unfortunately, I have to end the conversation here or I could lose my job. So that's where it clicked for me. I'm like, oh, there's religious implications here. So this movie, again, per what I said before I started this point, this movie is by no means trying to condemn religion or anything like that. It's just saying that there is a flaw in it. not to say that it's all bad, because there are good things that come from faith, and it's been proven time and time again throughout history, as much as it's proven that it can be faulty as well. But this movie, at least, the extent that it goes, is it's showing that through promoting certain ideas, other ones get buried or neglected, or they're played off, or people just bluntly say that they don't exist, when they definitely do exist, at least in the world of Donnie Darko. And he can't live like that. He's like, there's more here that we're not talking about, and you people are just ignoring it, and letting me and all these other students just simmer in this limited worldview, when we could have access to so much more. And he's frustrated by that. So I think that's a really interesting theme that drives us closer to the end of this movie and his catharsis. It's not the only factor, there's more to it, but that's one of the working parts in this crazy set of cogs that gets him to the end game here. So religion's a big part of that, about that. And kind of a perfect segue off of that is the next theme I want to talk about, which is fate and destiny. Now, I did bring up this a little earlier in this recording, where I said these words are similar, but they're also a little different, at least from my perspective, depending on how you understand them. Both of them have something to say about where we end up later on. But I don't know. When I hear the word fate, the thing that comes to mind immediately is death. Like, we're doomed. Like, there's an end of the line. Where are we going to wind up? How are we going to die? Under what circumstances? How old will we be? The specifics, the cold facts about where we wind up. But when I hear the word destiny, there's almost a more optimistic feel to that. Almost as if fate is not so concrete. When you say destiny, it's almost like you can have a little bit of insurgency, or complete insurgency, depending on how you interpret it, over where you wind up, what your life means, and on what hill you die. When you leave a legacy behind in your wake, what's that going to stand for? Even if no one knows that you ever existed, or if people that you could have met in your future never met you, is that for the better? And again, that's the question that we're left with at the end of the movie. So again, we already went over the idea of the school enforcing the emotions of love and fear. I'm sorry, I'm going over my chicken scratch again. But yeah, and sorry, forget that. Nick's that point. We've already gone over that in detail. But yeah, that's another thing I wanted to talk about, is the fact that Donnie is being kind of ordered, not really ordered, but tempted by Frank the Rabbit to do crazy, destructive things as he's sleepwalking around. He causes a fire, he throws an axe in that bull statue or dog statue at the school, he burns down that Patrick Swayze's house to expose his crimes in the process. But the really interesting thing I noticed about that is, through causing all these crimes that no one's actually pinned directly to him, all these characters who otherwise had nothing to do with each other, they are now looking towards a fire that Donnie started that indirectly brings them together. I kind of mentioned that before. Through Donnie simply existing and doing things, this world gets smaller, and people start to know others' names and their faces. I'll draw our attention to the very end of the film again, like literally the last seconds, where Gretchen, again, she's in a future where Donnie just dies from the plane accident, and she bikes past the house, and she shares this awkward wave with Donnie's mother. But now, because we're in this new future where that 30 days doesn't transpire, they have no reason to be connected whatsoever. No reason to know each other, or have just that indirect link being Donnie. Donnie being someone's son, and Donnie being someone's boyfriend. Or going steady with them, I don't know. They never specifically said boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the hell they were doing. I don't really understand the chemistry there. Again, that was one of those little obscure elements I couldn't quite figure out. But that's just one of many examples of how Donnie's just this integral glue that's holding this world, this mad world, together. And not to say that Donnie himself is necessarily important, or he's, again, going back to religion, like a messiah figure. Donnie himself isn't important. That's not what this movie's trying to say, I don't think. He's not a saintly figure. He's no messiah or martyr or anything like that. The idea this movie is proposing is if any one of these characters blipped off, stopped existing, or died too early in their story, how would this affect everyone else? What if this movie focused on the mother? What if this movie focused on Patrick Swayze, who's probably the worst character in this entire film? Like, if any of these people just blipped off, it would affect everyone else. If Patrick Swayze's character didn't exist, Donnie might not have had that additional push to expose this Middlesex place for how up in its own ass it is about all these really isolated ideas. And then by exposing Swayze's crimes, he exposes just how shallow they are in assuming this dogma. Again, we've gone down that path already, so I won't keep beating a dead horse. But yeah, going back to fate and destiny, again, every person in this story means something to everybody else, even if they don't directly know each other. It's like butterfly effect almost. You could throw chaos theory into there, but ultimately this is something that at least Donnie alone knows, that we all have a predetermined fate. I'd go with the word fate because he goes for the more nihilistic perspective. He's more negative on that. Donnie Darko. It's blunt and silly, but it makes sense. So ultimately, his catharsis, as I alluded to before, is that he would rather have the choice to destroy himself as opposed to being predestined towards a fate like everyone else, even if there's no meaning attached to it. He would rather go out on his own terms with his own meaning as opposed to living an unimportant life meaninglessly, or living an important life that winds up being worse, making things worse for everyone else. Again, depending on how you read that. So I found that really interesting. And not to say that I have a conclusive answer on what fate or destiny means for this movie, but that's just one of the questions that opens up for you to figure out. I might have my own answers. I might have asserted them already in one way or the other, but this is something that you can't avoid when discussing the integral themes of this film. Fate and destiny are so intertwined, and whether or not they can be manipulated, if we should just walk the course, even knowing that we can alter our futures, or is the future totally fluid? Is it totally chaotic, as the nihilists would say? The nihilists would argue, hey, there's no deity, there's no cosmos, there's no stars or that determine where you're supposed to wind up. But the benefit means you could do whatever you want. You could do whatever you think is important, which can also be misconstrued as a reason to go ahead and do really dangerous and horrible things as well. So you can read into that also. So that's a whole other discussion outside of this movie, but this movie leads you to that discussion. I think that's, taking a pause here, that's one of the things that makes this movie so cool, is the fact that it's not trying to give you answers, it's trying to give you questions to think about beyond this movie's bounds, beyond Donnie's world. When Frank says that the world is going to end, he's not saying the whole world, the planet, like Armageddon, meteors, flames, turtles falling out of the sky, I don't know. He's more saying Donnie's world, as he knows it, is going to end, more specifically. He's going to die. Everything that is important to him will no longer matter, because he will be dead. Because he'll be on the run, however you want to interpret that. So he opts to take the reins and gear himself towards suicide. blatantly. That's what this is. He effectively, happily, chooses to destroy himself to be sure people are better off. And again, as I mentioned towards the beginning of this podcast here, we're not meant to be on board with him and go, yeah, Donnie, you go back and alter history's events to be sure that turbine falls on your bed so everyone else is better off without you. That's just his perspective. We, as the outside viewer, we have full freedom to disagree. We can say, no, the world would have been better if you stuck around. You were the one who brought everyone together. Even though you existed to cause chaos, to cause death, in a weird way, this chaos is what gave this town nuance, gave this town more meaning beyond just simply love and fear. And that kind of ties into my roots studying Hinduism and Buddhism. One of the biggest themes is chaos and destruction. But the reason why it's so highly valued is because without chaos, destruction, even fear, as is highlighted more specifically in this movie, new things can't happen. New relationships can't form. New connections, new societies, new groups, new ideas. Things need to break in order for things to be born. And perhaps Donnie thought he was one of those things. And, I mean, one of my beliefs in his thought process is that, and this is going to lead into our discussion about Donnie and Frank, or maybe this is the beginning of that discussion, but through their interactions together, or spirit walks together, whatever you want to call it, Donnie, to some degree, says, I'm going to prove that we can control our destiny, but I won't be here to see whether or not that's the right thing to do. So he falls on the sword for the both of them. He says, I'm going to go ahead and alter history so you don't have to worry about that. Frank, you can go ahead and enjoy your life. You don't have to suffer anymore. You don't have to lose an eye. I'm going to take the fall. I'm going to let that turbine end my life. And he lets it happen. And then that takes us back to that Mad World sequence where we're seeing all these faces. And we see familiar faces, sorry. And one of those faces is Frank. And he is this character we barely even know at all. Alright, so well, basically, we're moving from Fate and Destiny into Frank territory, right? Frank the Rabbit, he's the face of this movie. What the hell is Frank, right? So let me roll back a little bit. Frank, he's the first voice that we hear in this movie. But we don't even see his face. We don't even see the rabbit mask until later on. We don't even know what his life is. We just know that he exists somewhere. Is he from the future? Is he from the past? The present? Another reality? We don't know. And we're not even sure of that by the end of the movie. But I have a theory. So, I think he exists in the same world as Donnie. Somewhere. And at some point, it's preordained by some power that their paths are supposed to cross. And in a freak accident, Frank kills Gretchen, and Donnie kills Frank out of rage or spite or whatever that moment was supposed to be for them. But again, because they both are... Again, this is going to go into the theme I'm going to dive into. But because they are both... engulfed in these concepts of fate and destiny already, they're not really feeling anything. They're just playing out these moments as they know they're supposed to play out. Part of them knows something we don't know. They know that Halloween night, Donnie is supposed to go Frank, and Donnie's supposed to be on the run. That's supposed to happen, and Gretchen's supposed to die. So going back to Frank, he is parallel to Donnie. He is just like him. He has the same questions. He has the same concerns. He is also working against the grain in whatever world he's in. Again, I think he's in the same world. He might just be in an adjacent town. He might just be in a different school. I think he's in close proximity. But some form of higher fate brought him to cross paths with Donnie, right? And both Donnie and Frank knew this. But the thing to me that proves that Frank is real, and also that he is basically just another Donnie out there, is that montage, the Mad World montage, where we see Frank with those 30 days undone, and he's surrounded by drawings of the rabbit mask, his eyes intact. But the moment that confirms my theory is that he brings a hand to his eye like, I'm okay, I'm fine. So those 30 days that we did see, they did happen. This movie isn't a cop-out by saying those didn't happen at all. By him doing that simple motion, it says, this shit happened. It was real. But Donnie did undo it through using Grandma Death's methods, whatever they might have been, they're beyond our understanding, to undo everything. So, and that's interesting, the fact that Frank was doing artwork, because Frank said to Gretchen briefly, just casual conversation, that he liked telling stories and he liked drawing characters relevant to those stories. And we even do get glimpses of his art. We even see a drawing pretty early on of this really big eye in his bedroom. And towards the end of the movie, like after shit hits the fan, we get a closer look at that eye drawing, and there's a skull in the iris that's been there the whole time. So that's interesting in and of itself. I'm going like Shining bonkers on pulling out all the little instances in this movie, but that's what this movie calls for. I love this so much more than Shining, by the way. But basically, all this is to say, Donnie and Frank are two people of many other people out there who choose this damnable path of daring to question one's own future, to dare to wonder if we can control our fate and or our destiny, or if we are even allowed to do that. If we can even entertain the prospect of gearing ourselves in a certain direction, when there might be some sort of greater force that is telling us what we are supposed to do, if we're supposed to stay the course, in lieu of not knowing what our course means. But both Donnie and Frank feel like it's worth a shot to make a sacrifice to see for sure if altering the future would be for the better. And through both being of that mindset that so few people adopt, that's how they see each other, that's how they commune with each other, through Donnie sleepwalking, through these dreams, through the therapist's hypno sessions and all of that. Their paths cosmically intertwine, they overlap. Those wormholes are what allow them to speak to each other. So, as I said before, Donnie falls on the sword. He's like, I'm going to prove this theory. I don't know what the end result's going to be, but Frank, you're going to see it. And he does see it. I mean, we don't know how he's feeling about it, but we know that whatever the end result is, he's got it. He's alive once those 30 days are undone. His eye's intact. He knows that fate's not going to happen to him. And Donnie kind of... Yeah, he saves Frank from death by pulling this maneuver and allowing that turbine to drop on his head. So then the question that is left to us, and I don't have an answer for this, is through undoing all this chaos he did by causing the arson, through not shooting Frank, through never falling in love with Gretchen, through not reconstituting the relationship with his mother, etc., with all these other characters, did allowing himself to die, did that make everyone else's lives better? Did he give them a chance to see things that only he and Frank could see? Were they allowed to finally see a spectrum of emotions beyond love and fear? That's rhetorical. But if I'm to give an answer to that, I would say no. I think the world was better with Donnie in it, with those 28 days intact. Even though it resulted in danger and death. You can twist this question in any way you want. You could say my answer is a bad answer. You could say, no, like, Donnie's a dangerous guy. in this timeline, he killed Frank. He burned part of a school, a building, he threw an axe in a monument. He's a hooligan, he's a problem. And that's a fair statement to walk out of this movie with. You could argue that too. What I'm trying to say is no answer here is wrong. It's just that you're left with a question. Was Donnie right? Did he make things better through allowing himself to die? He knew he could control fate and destiny. Did he have the right to do that? Should he have done it? And that's what we're left with. And Frank was also had these questions, but the difference between them both is Donnie was willing to take the fall, make that sacrifice. Again, kind of tapping back into faith, where you have like these figures who give up their lives and things of that nature. So you can almost see Donnie as a holy figure within his own story, within this world that Frank spoke of. So within the confines of his own mind, he's that hero. But is he really that hero? Again, if this movie focused on any other character in this story, even just one of the daughters, and they're the ones who choose to die a month ago, are they correct in having made that decision? Donnie's not important. It just happens to be Donnie. He just happens to be the subject of this movie. It could have been anyone else. So yeah, those are my theories on this movie. Let's clock out in an hour. I think that's pretty good. So I think I was kind of getting to a broken record point there. So those are pretty much my initial thoughts. I'll wake up tomorrow, I'll have more thoughts, I'll recoil, I'll be like, wait, no, I want to rewrite that. That's not the point. These are just my raw ideas. But that being said, I still do have a few questions here that I'll just rattle off really quickly. Firstly, I mentioned the plane. So again, we know from the very beginning of the movie, a plane turbine falls into his room. If he hadn't taken those drugs, which we'll talk about later, then he would have died. But of course, he alters history, so that way, that specific plane with his mom and younger sister on it, that turbine would fall off specifically to hit his room. So my question is, firstly, is he the one that dropped that turbine that missed at the beginning of the movie? We know he's the one that dropped it, that took control at the end, but in the first turbine drop, in those 30 days where he lives, and we see those 30 days transpire throughout the film, is he the one that somehow dropped that initial turbine that did not hit him? Or was that part of some divine plan for him to die there? Was he supposed to die this whole time? Was that the divine plan in place? So that's my other question. If not Donnie, then who or what dropped it? And one of the reasons why I respect this movie so much is it doesn't use words like God or faith or religion or cosmos or destiny too much. Those are words that are bubbling in your head the whole time you're watching, but they're never overtly stated. So it's nice that this movie doesn't lock you within the perspective of one single viewpoint, which is great. And I love that it gives you that flexibility. It's such a gift. So what is that source of that initial drop of the turbine, if not Donnie himself? And I don't think Frank did it. I don't think he was trying to act against Donnie. If anything, they were trying to work together. They were partners in this, in trying to test this morbid theory of controlling one's fate. So that's two questions kind of bucketed into one. The plane. I don't understand the plane. That's something I can't really answer right now. Next up is the bullies. One thing that I got a little lost in, because the movie started to get was very heavy towards the ending. So I started to get a little bit lost. But at the very end, when not the very, very end, but at the climax where the 28 days runs out, and then just before Frank runs over Gretchen, Gretchen and Donnie are being assaulted by those two bullies. And one of them, Seth Rogen. Alright, sure. I knew they were hostile, but I don't understand why they were at that cellar door at that specific moment. Again, maybe there's just external elements of this fate that we're thinking about that just so happened to drive them here. just perfectly. It's part of that grand plan that may or may not exist. That's another question. I didn't even write that down here, but I'll include this here. Cellar Door, Drew Barrymore's character, who I thought was great. She was one of my favorites. Before she left, because she got kicked out by the school, she wrote the word cellar door. She said there was an author who wrote down those words saying that of all words and letters in the English language, there's no better combination, no more beautiful combination than cellar door. And then she just leaves. You never hear another word from her again. So, and then Donnie discovers an actual cellar door later. So I don't know what the significance of that was. I mean, yeah, it was foreshadowing, sure. But there must have been some sort of element there. I wish we had more time with that teacher. But again, that's the point of the movie. You wish you had more time with these characters. But Donnie dupes you out of that through allowing those 30 days to be nixed. So that's another thing, the cellar door. And again, the bullies, my main point there. I wasn't totally sure what their motive was, why they were so hostile. I never understood that throughout this movie. Not negative, it's just something I don't really get. And then another, I'm actually coming up with an answer now. Why did Frank kill Gretchen? I don't think it was intentional. I think we answered that as we were going down this list here. So as for the moment itself, as for what actually happened before Donnie undid time, it was just Halloween Eve, and Frank was just driving with a clown buddy. We don't know who the clown was. Again, the clown, he wasn't part of this nihilistic thought, so he's not part of this conversation at all. He's just a bystander, like any other character in this movie. But yeah, they're driving. I think they swerve to avoid Grandma Death, I think, is there. Or maybe not there. She's like not acknowledged in that moment, which is the weird thing too. Like, she's also trapped in this moment with them. That's a whole other can of worms. I'm not even going to dive into that. But Frank swerves and hits Gretchen. But I think we already cleared that. It's because there's some greater plan that dictated this is what's supposed to happen. However, by this point, while Donnie and Frank are playing it out, perhaps against their own will, they know upstairs that they can't get too emotionally involved. They have an opportunity to change things, whatever this ending of the clock will mean for them, whatever this moment will be, because they don't know what it's going to be. Yeah, and not really one of my questions, but another point I didn't really allude to is Gretchen's story. Actually, yeah, I could convert this into a question. Was Gretchen's story real? Because I found her relationship with Donnie very odd, which actually even made me question if Gretchen existed at all to begin with. That might be a big theory that has no grounds for existing, but that's a theory that I've played around with a little bit in the little time that I've had between seeing the movie and then doing this. But she goes on this she tells us this really quick story about how the father brutally assaulted her mother, and the mother and her ran off, hid in town, got new names. And the last we hear of the mother, who we never see, is she is gone. Did she leave? Did she storm out? We don't know. Was she killed, abducted? So many questions. And then that's just the last we hear of that story. And then Gretchen falls back on Donnie to give her comfort. Donnie's like her drug to escape her hell, effectively. And again, I still question their relationship, because there are so many moments throughout their relationship where I feel like, how are they not falling apart right now? Like, for example, we can infer Donnie told his buddies about Gretchen's past, and Gretchen storms out, greatly offended. Donnie immediately apologizes, and then they lock lips. And even I was baffled, like, wait, whoa, you told these goofs about her deepest, darkest secret, and you love him for that? Like, it's so sudden. And again, that's one of this movie's weaknesses, in that by design, we're not supposed to get to know these characters too well, other than Donnie. That's purposeful. But as a result of that, we don't understand Gretchen well enough to get why she would forgive Donnie so quick. I guess maybe because now that the secret's out, she doesn't have to keep it boxed inside of her, possibly. I don't know. But yeah, she's an oddity of this story that I really do want to unpack more after this video, for sure. And I definitely have more questions in there, but those were the main ones. That's what I got. I will conclude here with my overall thoughts. Again, I won't go too deep into it because I think I've asserted them enough throughout this video on repetition, and I apologize for that if I did. But ultimately, this movie is an exploration of very big, broad strokes in starting level philosophy, existentialism and nihilism, as I mentioned before. But also, if you want to speak in simpler terms, fate, control, will, causation, butterfly effect, how we affect others, chaos theory, like in Jurassic Park, the video game butterfly effect, the movie butterfly effect. I'm sorry, not the video game butterfly effect. I was thinking of Until Dawn, where, like, yeah, like, if you play a role-playing game where, like, every choice matters, like Telltale Walking Dead, I even think about that, where every decision affects something that happens later on. Like, if Donnie didn't burn down Patrick Swayze's place, would he have ever been exposed for the monster he really was? Like, that's another smaller question that we can ask in this this quagmire of whatever's going on here. But ultimately, I came out of this movie damn well knowing I don't fully understand it. And it's complicated, it's dense, it's thick, it's confusing, it's frustrating. But it's a good kind of frustrating that doesn't cop you out, it doesn't make you feel cheated. And that might just be because I'm speaking from a position where I've studied and utilized the tools that I think, at least from my perspective, are essential in unpacking whatever the hell this movie is trying to lay down. But I love it. I love this movie. I still don't recall why this movie caught my attention when I was a little kid, and I watched it pre-recorded on TV, possibly censored. But maybe that's really a testament to the message it's bringing out there, to its quality, to its intricacies and nuance. Before I even studied philosophy all the way back then, before I even heard the word philosophy, something about that movie grabbed me. I watched the movie and I knew there was something important happening here. I didn't know what it was. And even now, I don't have a concrete idea, but I'm able to posit a theory that makes sense. This story is about two people, Donnie and Frank, who are cursed with the ability to think for themselves too much. And is this a curse or a gift? They have this, but then the conversation rolls into, should they utilize this power? And if they do use it, will things be improved? Or will things get worse? Or will it just not make a difference? And we're not sure. And again, this paradigm could extend to any other character in the story, or to any person outside of Middlesex, outside of the US, anywhere in the world. If anyone, you, me, blipped off, like whether by means of like some crazy accident, a double-decker bus plows into you, or an airplane turbine falls into your bedroom, would that drastically alter the fates of the people you know or would know? Or would fate just like lock things in place anyway? Was Donnie's sacrifice meaningless? Maybe even without his self-sacrifice, everyone would wind up in their stations by the end of those 30 days anyways. Frank would be dead anyways, Patrick Swayze would be incriminated anyways, Gretchen would be dead anyways, the mother would have a new appreciation for her son regardless. We don't know. But that's the beauty of this whole movie. All these what ifs. What if something were different? And then we translate that onto our own lives. What if some crazy traumatic event in our life that did or didn't happen were altered ever so slightly by the slightest detail? Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention also my question on the drugs. I don't fully understand that. But like, if you didn't take the pill, that, or the meds, then would that have been determinant of if the turbine would have fallen on him or not? That's another thing that I don't understand, so I'm not even going to tap into that. But that's another thing I have. But yeah, I'm going to cut myself off before I keep on and this becomes 2 hours. But let me know what you think about this movie in the comments, what your theories are, what your experience with this movie is. If you were there when this movie first debuted, I don't know what the year was. I apologize for that. I should have done a little homework. What did you think about it walking out? Do you still think the same way that you thought back then? Or has your opinions changed? Do you like this movie more? Do you dislike it now? Or do you have a whole new bag full of theories that could be applicable to what the heck this thing means? But I really loved it. This was really good. I would absolutely rewatch this. Maybe not soon, but I love this movie a lot. It's such an oddity. I love the fact that it dares to be whatever the heck it is. It knows that it's bizarre. It knows that it's meant to be confusing and weird and play with your head, but it doesn't do it in a way that's pandering or infuriating like other movies out there. Like, people on this channel know that I do not like Christian Bale movies at all. They've never worked for me. But even those are trying to posit new statements and theories about human life, morality, ethics, and things of that nature, self-control, existentialism, stuff of that nature. But I think the reason why those don't work for me is because they're so bluntly stated. Here, it's more obscured and hidden. But because of that, it gives you more of a challenge, right? Whereas in any Bale movie, it's so just in your face, and there's just no allure. But in this one, not only is that allure useful in that you can think for yourself, but it's also earned. It feels rewarding by the end. You don't feel copped out. You don't feel down on yourself. You feel like you were given something. You just don't know what that is yet. But unlike Donnie, you have time to choose what it means for you. This movie is as difficult, complicated, and frustrating as you choose it to be. The story's linear. It plays out in a linear timeline until the final moments where time's undone and the 30 days are undone. Otherwise, it plays it straight. It's up to you to make it difficult, though. And I think I've done that myself. So that's where I'll leave you here. But yeah, thank you guys very much for listening. Again, let me know what you thought. Give it another watch if you haven't watched it for a long time. If you watch this video regardless, this is a gem of a movie. It's high up there for me. I really liked it. The soundtrack's a banger too. I want to slide that in there too. Thank you very much. Take care, and I will see you all next time.